UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Are they extraterrestrial, interdimensional, time travelers in origin, or are they simply a result of top-secret military projects, false flag alien invasions, PSYOP, drones, or other human-made aircraft? Join the discussion now on UAP Crossfire.
Good evening and welcome to UAP Crossfire. It's great to have you with us here tonight, where four distinguished gentlemen will ponder the infinite mysteries of the universe and share their thoughts with you. Joining me tonight is Chris DePerno. Chris, how are you?
I'm great, Padre. How are you?
I'm good, functioning within specified parameters. All lights are green on the dash. Commander Cobra, welcome. How are you tonight, sir?
I'm very good. I'd just like to note for the audience that it took an act of Congress to declare me a gentleman when I got my commission. Just like to throw that out there early.
Okay. And Don Ecker, how are you, Don?
Well, I've not been declared a gentleman recently, Padre, but other than that, doing all right.
Yeah, you've been declared other things.
Well, I do so by holy dispensation, as they say. Now, what we have for you tonight is a good show lined up with a full bunch of the topics that we're going to be talking about. The first one is the recent MUFON Symposium, and our own Chris DePerno went there. Chris, for those of us who've never been to a MUFON Symposium, kind of give us a high-level view first. What is supposed to happen there, and are there vendors? Is it just speakers? Tell us about it.
No, it's actually a combination of things. First of all, there's they actually have training the very first day. That's on a Thursday, which I was in charge of, and we had a great training session. It was all day, and they teach you for everything from astronomy to biology to how to collect evidence to interview people and stuff. It's a very serious time. We had a great class, and we try to bring the most scientific and the most up-to-date stuff in order for people to, who want to get into ufology and want to learn about this stuff, how to go about doing it, and how to actually, investigate a sighting or an encounter. And so we had so many people there that were just amazed by that. Yes, Commander.
Commander.
Do you have a lot of people that are still interested in getting into studying ufology? The investigation?
Believe it or not, there were a lot of younger people at the class. And I was kind of surprised myself because normally the class has, older people who are retired, they always wanted to get into this subject. But I was actually amazed at the field training that there were younger people there that wanted to learn more about ufology. I think their point was how much of this is real and how much of it, that people should say is malarkey, and that's the best word I could say about it and stuff. And they're very curious as to how this all go about. So I think it was interesting for them. And then the second day we start, different types of lectures. We had Thomas Jane, who's a very well-known actor, give the banquet speech and talked about his ideas of what ufology should be and what, UFOs have been to him. And then we go on to other lectures. And one of the top lectures, and this was amazing, they talked about Leonard Stringfield's diaries. Now, people do not realize Leonard Stringfield diaries. MUFON has obtained them. And I was one of the lucky ones that was able to redact some of the diaries. And the stuff that he had in there was amazing. And one of the lectures was about the Stringfield diaries and a alien that he called Alpha. And that how Alpha actually worked with the U.S. government and other things about that. And I want to bring Bob Spearing on someday to talk about the Leonard Stringfield diaries and some of the other things that were there. And then we had a lecture on government stuff that the government does in far as ufology and weaponry of that they believe that based on crash retrievals done. But here's the most amazing thing. A year ago, we had a piece of metal come from Russia that was presented at the symposium. And what they did was they took that metal to a laboratory. And at that laboratory, they came with the results of what this metal was laid of. And basically, it's aerogel. Now, for people who don't know what aerogel is, it's the lightest material there is on Earth, from what I believe. They make it out of a gas. It starts as a gas. They make it into a solid, and it's lighter than air. But the way this metal was composed, we do not have the technology. And this is not me talking about. This is the laboratory saying that, yes, we can make aerogel. Yes, we do have this type of component and this type of component. However, the laboratory says that we do not have the technology at this time to create this type of material as it is. It's very heat resistant. It is very light. It under a microscope, you could actually see crystal particles to it and everything else. So they gave a whole presentation on that. So this is the type of stuff that you would see at a MUFON Symposium, that you go there. So they have it once a year. They try to get some of the best lecturers in the United States to talk at these symposiums. And, if you're really interested in ufology, this is the type, start there. If you want to know the basics, this is the place to go.
I want to just follow up with aerogel there, because this is the first time I've heard it. You say it's a metal, but it's very light for a metal. Is it something that we currently use at all in aerospace?
Something, Padre? I don't know. I would refer that question to Commander Cobra, because, I think in some respects it may be used in flight capabilities, but I don't know. I know we can make it. I know it can be created here on Earth, but I really don't know, what we're using it for right now.
Commander?
So aerogel is in air quotes, unobtainium kind of material, where, yes, it has been created, and what we are able to produce, I'm not sure where exactly it's used, because I'm almost positive that it's used in areas that probably are in a black type program. But the material itself holds a lot of promise for its light weight and its strength. But like the early composite materials of using carbon, because the first composite use was actually wood, it was plywood. The mosquito fighter of World War II that the Brits built is truly the first composite fighter that we built. And it had, because of the layers and the glue, it had incredible qualities, a lot of strength, and the weight was very light, and it was also out of a material that was abundant to them. And when they made it up with the Merlin engines, they had great outcomes. A similar kind of process is going for aerogel. What's interesting about the sample that because Chris brought it on the show, if everybody remembers, probably about 2 months ago, I guess, if my calculation is correct. I think I was back from the desert when you showed it. The particular source that he has looks like it's not of this world, or if you are reading the history book that I sent everyone on the show, from a previous civilization that predates us in its ability to do something like that. So it could be something of extraterrestrial origin, extra Earth origin, like a meteor, because there's a lot of materials that we have recovered now, and some of them have been fashioned, in ancient times from meteorites that are unexplainable. What's really amazing about some of them, if you study it, is the boring. If something was like a stone was made into something of like a jewelry accoutrement, the bore that's through it is it's smaller than anything we can do, even with lasers. Some of this it's there, so it begs the question: how could ancient times could we have done this? Or is it something that's the result of a recovered crash or something that's left behind?
Well, speaking of ancient times, we're going to go to Don in a moment. But first, I was reading an article today about a mummy that was found in Siberia that had elaborate tattoos. I mean, so elaborate. This mummy, of course, preserved, they estimate its age at about 2,500 years. And these tattoos were so precise in their imagery that they don't understand how they had the technology to do that. But what was interesting is some of the creatures depicted in those tattoos. One was clearly a griffin, which is like a winged lion with the head of an eagle, and the other was clearly a dragon. And you have to ask yourself, if people in Siberia had never seen something like that, how are they getting those images? Don, you are our expert in ancient technologies here. Tell us a little bit about what you think is transpiring as we are unearthing, as the commander said, more and more artifacts that point to advanced technology, perhaps pre-flood.
Well, there's actually, as far as I can determine, only a couple of ways that this would have happened. Number one, a very advanced human civilization that was destroyed with the cessation of the last ice age during the Younger Dryas event, which happened roughly 12,600 years ago, give or take. Or there's another possibility, advanced technology brought down to the Earth. And talking about the mummy discovered in Siberia with those very unusual animal pictographs placed on them in a tattoo. You know, I think, I consider the possibility that there is so much more to this planet than we currently even dream about, all right? I was reading yesterday about an encounter a couple of people had while on a hiking trip, of all places, in the Appalachian Mountains. Now, that's where I come from, Pennsylvania. And I've heard different pronunciations. I've always called it the Appalachian Mountains. And from PA, that's how we referred to it. But what this guy who relayed this incident said was that they were hiking along pretty deep into the forested areas. As he came up a small rise, ahead of him, perhaps 150 feet, he saw what looked like an animal crouched down on the ground. He thought, "Oh my, maybe I ran into a bear.
Sure.
It's eating some carrion or something, right?" And he kind of stopped. He looked. Suddenly, this creature ahead of him lifted its head up, stared straight at this fellow and his buddy, stood up, and the guy said it was about a 7-foot tall, humanoid appearing creature, except its head, which was shaped like a dog or a wolf. And its muzzle was covered entirely in blood. Now, we've all heard stories like this in the last few years, but until a few years ago, I personally never heard any stories like that. When I was a teenager living back home, every year, like clockwork during deer season, I was up in the woods. And I'll tell you, I never saw anything unusual like that. Although, at the time, other people did claim to see things during a UFO flap. Now, to get back to this fellow with the tattoos, these tattoos on him perhaps were composed from eyewitness accounts of people that saw these things before they disappeared. Or perhaps sometimes these things still pop up, but not from here, from somewhere else. And I'm just trying to make sense of it. I hope you don't think I've gone off the deep end.
Not yet.
But, okay, good. But at this point, you know, I am loath to say anything like, oh my, that's impossible. Because in all the years I've lived now, I've learned that there's a heck of a lot that may be possible that I never considered before.
Well, if you will allow the Padre to make a confession to you, gentlemen, I've always been intrigued by cryptozoology, strange creatures, and how they're occasionally interacting with UAPs. And since I re-entered this area of discussion, UAPs, and it was about a year and a half ago, I've had a change of mind. I used to think that these creatures were demonic apparitions, and I suffered from, I think, a belief system that many people with scientific minds in this day and age would have, that, well, these are ancient people. They're primitive. Their imaginations, because they didn't have the intellect to grasp what was going on around them, they just kind of made things up that would fit with their religious worldview. But now I'm thinking these people were like us. They had reasoning capabilities. They knew what a dog was. They knew what a man was. And if they're reporting werewolf-like creatures, people who had nothing to gain from reporting things like that, or the artistry that depicts what we call mythological creatures. Well, and I can't even say that we haven't found anything, say, like a griffin in the fossil record, because I'm coming to believe that there probably are some bones of these things, and they're squirreled away in a warehouse somewhere because it doesn't fit the narrative.
Well, Padre, we know we have top men working on such things.
And top women, Commander. We must be
top people, top persons.
Yes.
Well, you know, talking about weird bones, in the 19th century, here in the western United States, multiple accounts have come forward of people having discovered bones of what apparently were giant humanoid peoples.
Yep.
And they were sent back to Washington, D.C., to the Smithsonian. And unfortunately, apparently, the Smithsonian has a very unfortunate black hole there, because all this stuff went in and nothing ever came out again. Now, you got to ask yourself, why would they have done that? Well, for one thing, it would have impacted on their view of Christianity at that time. Okay? Nobody in that time period wanted to upset any of the major religious institutions. And if you had the skeletal remains of a 12 or 13 and a half foot giant humanoid creature, just the bones, that could be very, very real sticky wicket for a lot of people. But regardless, a lot of those stories still came forward. They were reported on in the newspapers. So that could be a very, I think, a very good reason, Padre.
Can I jump in there for a second, Padre?
Please.
Ecker, I think you're actually onto something, but I'm going to take a slightly different slant on that. I think the interpretation of the time of Christianity is much what we deal with when we talk about the climate change situation that we confront now. What I mean by that is, I guess not everybody's reading the same Bible Judeo-Christian Bible that I'm reading, because giants were part of the Bible.
Yep.
It's part of that record. So I think you're right. I think someone said, hey, look, this is how we're going. This is what the convention is. Much like the science that says, well, you know, all this erosion on the earth is from this, but it doesn't follow. There's no possible way there was a flood. There's no possible way that Noah could have possibly existed because X, Y, and Z. And then when someone comes in and says, oh, I found W, and W says the erosion is from large amounts of water that moved through and caused this. And then you look at the record and it says there's a very good chance that we had different solar system interactions with the planets around us, because we've decided the planets don't leave their orbit ever. That's just not going to happen. Again, no basis for that. No basis for the conclusion. And then you always know when someone's getting upset when you challenge that. Well, prove that to me. Well, I can't. It's the convention and we've decided how it is. So I think you're onto it. And if you really want to go into the mysticism of the Judeo-Christian traditions, the fallen angels that accompanied Satan are supposed to be the fathers of these giants.
And I think also, just to maybe push back a little bit, Don, on what you said, I don't think it was the religious people that were concerned about the discovery of the bones, because as the commander said, for people who are of the Jewish and Islamic and also Christian faiths, there's an acknowledgement that at one time giants roamed the earth. But that period of time when the fossils were first starting to be dug up because we were starting to build bigger buildings that needed deeper foundations, and the first one was found in England. It was a bone of what we now call an iguanodon dinosaur of the duckbill type family. But these things were coming forward at a time when there was this enlightenment, this new science going on. Darwin had been published. Darwinism was beginning to spread throughout the scientific community, and the science movement was eager to squelch religion and Christianity, and I think that they might have been the ones who were afraid of something that would upset that. Now, let me tag that today with, I spoke this afternoon with a dear friend of mine who has been the CEO of several major companies. You would know the names, but I don't have permission to disclose it or his name. He was recently attending a presentation that was put on by one of the men who helped build and design the James Webb Telescope. And this gentleman, in his speech, showed pictures of things that the James Webb Telescope has taken and said that these images totally upend everything that we have been taught about astrophysics, space, the universe. He said the textbooks are completely going to have to be rewritten. But the challenge that we have is there are forces in place who don't like it when everything has to be rewritten. And I think that they are part and parcel of those who want to keep things the way they are on planet Earth and don't want anything or anybody who's going to upset the apple cart. But there's a tidal wave of new information that's going to be coming out in the next few years that is going to really force us to think about space travel, astrophysics, propulsion systems, all of these things. What do you think about that, Chris?
Well, I was just going to say, it's all about control.
Yeah.
I mean, from the early days of the Condon Report to other things, there's very few that dictate to the very many. And we're not allowed to explore this type of information. We're not allowed to digest it. We're not allowed to, look into it more because they feel it's not good for us, or they lose control. And that's basically what everybody's been saying. I've been listening for the last 5 minutes and I'm going, oh my God, they're just talking about control of the masses. And we don't want you to know this alternate to this religion. We don't want you to know about giants and stuff. Even though some of this stuff leaks out or goes out, there's not a push to say, okay, let's explore this. You know, someone's not saying, I think there should be a large amount of investigations into this to find it. And I think that's one of the things that we have to conquer, so we can become better people, is to be able to start looking at all these theories, all these things that we just discussed just now, and say, you know, we need to look into it. We need to find out what the truth is. The truth is out there. I'm talking like Fox Mulder right now. The truth is out there, but they don't want us to know it.
Yeah.
And
Well, there's
right.
something else too that figures into that with all this new information that's being released. People's attention span is approximately the width of a gnat's butt, okay? Gnat has a very, very small butt, and people's attention spans also are equally short. The news cycle that we have, something splashing all over the headlines today, and by tomorrow, before the day following, it's gone. There's something else there. And it just in and out. Now, talking about stuff like this, these ancient gigantic bones, the Younger Dryas event, the end of the Ice Age, a lot of this people just tune out. What, you know, their attitude, what the hell does that have to do with me today? All right?
True.
Well, hey, that's what you're contending with.
Can I jump in real quick on you for a second, Don? Because I want your reaction to this.
Absolutely.
You've been on this for a long time. Let's talk about our world, our community. Specifically when you get into UAP and UFO, and they do not, there's a large consortium of people who do not want to discuss anything else as a connection in the paranormal experiences that go on. That if you bring up, well, we seem to have a cryptid kind of trend that shows up in many of these reports. Or you talk about what Paulino used to talk about, that he seemed to have all these rips, these cross sections of ghostly paranormal activity, time kind of portal crossovers. And, you know, that's been in the news in the last couple of days of another former NASA scientist, you know, confesses to that there are many portals on the Earth. It was a great article, very light on fact, really good on the writing. It was, but again, as Don said, it was designed for about a 3 to 4.5 minute read. No pictures, really, no video, just just words, and it was obviously written and packaged for that. But when we look at our community, one of our core constituencies, so to speak, there's a lot of pushback on anything else but the subject they want to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. For instance, we have people who are solidly in the extraterrestrial camp. Now, UAP are from another planet, period, no backs. We all have to open our minds here because gaining a lot of ground now is the interdimensional approach. And you have to be willing to have your mindset changed if you really want to get at truth. Otherwise, you're not going to get anywhere.
Yeah, but Padre, also, there's a lot of I should say, a big push on the demonic front. Demons and angels and stuff.
Yes.
You could see stuff like Tucker Carlson, who says, I'm not touching this anymore.
Yeah.
And, pretty much alludes that this is all spiritual, and he was a big UFO. I mean, almost every week he had something on ufology on his show, which was a very popular show. And then he found out something that scared him enough to say, I'm not touching it anymore. Yeah. And alluded to the thing that it was extremely spiritual. And I think there's a case where you can say that part of this is a spiritual realm of stuff that you have to look at. That's the thing about this, is we only get a limited amount of information, and then we're stuck with that. And I just wish that we could open up the floodgates and let it all come out and just then find out where we need to go with it.
I'm going to tell you something that I tell my congregation, being a pastor, that life is spiritual. And we are not physical beings that have a spirit. We are spiritual beings that for the moment are clad in these flesh and blood vessels. And we negate the spiritual and the religious to our own peril. We have got to acknowledge now, as the evidence is beginning to amount, that what we thought was science, and, follow the science, don't question the science. Well, that was the mantra during COVID. And now what have we learned since then? That the science was pretty messed up. So we have got to be able to not get all upset and, begin to throw insults and maligning people. We have to be willing to allow opposing views and then use our powers of reason to determine whether or not they are correct.
We experienced that with this show at the very beginning of this show.
How so?
Okay. There was an individual that was so intolerant of opposing viewpoints that this person got up and walked out in the middle of a show. Now, I'm not going to name any names. Those who were here know who I'm talking about. But that's the kind of mindset that we've been dealing with for the last at least 6 or 8 years. Okay? The reason this nation today, the United States, is so drastically divided is because people have lost the ability to have a reasonable, reasoning discussion. I'm right, you're wrong, that's all there is to it. And that's what you're dealing with.
No disagreement, Don. And obviously, in my world, that was by design. That wasn't by accident. That wasn't a cultural breakdown or evolution, or in some people's cases, would try to claim that it was an improvement. It's just not there. We don't teach in school critical thinking, and I mean, it's almost now it's a belabored term. And I'm going to give you a good case in point. Behind me, the picture is references an email that we received, and we'll get into the email in a little bit, from one of our many great listeners, and I greatly appreciate those folks that take time. And I apologize in this particular case that I did not answer Travis's email yet. I will. And hopefully he'll pick up the show. Either he's listening to us live or he's going to catch it up on that. Critical thinking requires you to weigh what you are seeing. Now, the Padre and I have talked about it a lot. I use critical thinking to try to explain to people why I believe in God. I try to explain what happens, what has happened, and go forward. I don't expect to convert them. If I'm going to convert anybody to believe this, it's not what I say, it's how I conduct myself in life. That's the mission that I'm on there. But the same kind of application happens in this. And Don, I remember years back when you were on my previous show, we were talking, and I explained to you that in flight test, we work really, really hard to get it down to 5, 4, 3% unknown before we go fly. Because then we figure we have a pretty good chance that if in that little teeny segment it starts to go sideways, we probably gave ourselves a way to safely get back down the ground or escape the problem. I take that same kind of approach when I look at any kind of the reported events that are going on. I want to analyze that. I want to say, let's figure out if there is reasonable or other types of explanations to what's going on. And when you can't get those explanations, that's where I think it really gets exciting. We're not living in a world right now really accept that anymore.
I had something, Commander, that I want to throw out now with what you just said concerning your belief in God, in a God. This is something that I have told a few people. I know I broached the subject to Padre a couple of weeks ago. I may have told you guys, I don't recall if I did or not, but on Easter Sunday, 1972, in Quang Tri province in Vietnam, I was wounded severely, okay? Easter Sunday now. And I was bleeding out. I mean, I was one hell of a mess. And they sent a medevac in, picked me up. Actually, two medevacs. The first one had an unfortunate oops as it was lifting off. And they got another one in, put me on it, took me down to Phu Bai. Now, I was in the medical evac in Phu Bai, and while I was laying there, and I'll never forget this is kind of a cute little aside, I was in agony. And at one moment, you know, it just got to the point without even thinking, I went, oh, Jesus Christ! And a Catholic chaplain, Father Tony, popped in. And he looked at me and he grinned and he said, you rang? And I said, oh, Padre, I'm sorry. He said, no, my son. He said, you're fine. He said, so we chatted for a brief moment. He asked how I was doing. And I said, oh, not real good. He said, son, do you have a favorite Bible verse? And I said, well, yes, I do. I said, and it was my mother's also, the 23rd Psalm. Well, he said, I'll be right back. And he went off to get a Protestant Bible. And I told him it didn't make a damn to me, whether it was Protestant, Catholic, whatever. But he came back and we read it together. And then he patted me. And that was just, I'll never forget that. But they ended up shipping me down to Da Nang. They immediately rushed me into surgery. And in surgery, on the table, I died. I was gone. 2 minutes worth. And I'll tell you how I know that exactly in a moment. But I can remember lying on the table. They had already given me the anesthesia. And that morning, of course, I had no idea I was going to be shot up. That morning, I had been out all night. I was the non-commissioned officer in charge of the reactionary platoon. And I was checking all the bunkers around our site there because we were expecting the NVA, we were expecting them to hit us. And about, I don't know, 5:30 or so maybe, hadn't eaten in 2 days. I was hungry. I was tired. So I scrounged up a ration and I ate it. Well, that came back to bite me on the ass in a very big way. When they gave me the anesthesia, it reacted with that food in my stomach. You know, if you're going in for surgery or something,
sure,
they'll tell you don't eat for 18 hours or whatever, huh?
You started to aspirate.
That's exactly what happened. And I choked to death. And immediately they started working on me. But in the meantime, I remembered this. Suddenly, I was like 10 or 15 feet in the air. And this is something else I will never forget. I was never more at peace or contentment with myself ever before. And I'm just floating away and I'm looking around and I look down. I remember this. I looked down and I saw these medical people working on somebody. Didn't even make an impression on me that it was me, because that's who it was. But as I'm floating off and I'm just having a good old time, suddenly something grabbed me from behind on my shoulders. This is what I recall. And it or they or them, whatever it was, pushed me back toward the table. And this deep baritone voice said to me words like, "Your work here is not yet done." Boom! Next thing I know, I'm waking up in intensive care. Now, how did I know I was gone for 2 minutes? This nurse walked into ICU and she looked at me and she said, "Hey, Don, I've been looking for you for a long time." I had no idea who this woman was, no more than a fly on the moon. And I said, "I don't know you." She said, "My name is Mary, and I'm from your hometown in Altoona, Pennsylvania." Honest to God. And then she told me, she said, "Boy, we thought we lost you. We had to really work on you to get you back, but here you are." And then, after all that was said and done, and I'm healing up, they sent me from there. I went to Guam. I had to have some more surgery in Guam. Then they shipped me back. I ended up in Okinawa because that's where I originally had been stationed. And if the truth be told, I bullshitted my way to get back to Okinawa. That's another story, but with a Navy doctor in Guam. But anyway, I forgot about that entire sequence. It went right out of my mind for about 3 years. And then it started coming back to me. And I got to tell you, guys, that was some freaky stuff. But whoever that was that grabbed me. Now, my question, I came to the conclusion a long time ago that it could have only been a celestial being. I don't want to throw any labels on it like angel or anything else, but that's the only thing that made sense to me. Do you have any ideas about that?
I would agree with you, Don.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. 100%.
I think it wasn't your time, Don.
Well, obviously.
Right. And I just think that...
and what a crappy show it would be if you didn't make it to be here tonight.
Yeah.
And
and Don, and just to keep the record straight here, because you and I have talked at length about this experience that you had, one of many amazing ones. 2 points I want to make. One is you returned to the field, correct?
Yeah.
So after you recovered from this, you went back to work, so to speak.
Yeah.
Second thing, I'm pretty sure you mean to also mention that the only time that you've experienced such peace and joy is when you met Vicky and got married. Yes. Just say yes.
Absolutely. You're correct.
Well, you saved them on that one, Commander. Oh, Vicky's not in the house.
That's why I'm here.
Oh, baby. We got to talk after the show, Don. You got to be better than that. Boy, if my wife was standing here right now.
No, honestly, he caught me off guard with that. He really did.
That's my job.
I told my wife to embrace her mistakes, and she gave me a hug.
Yeah.
So these near-death experiences are myriad, thousands of them reporting similar encounters. And there are some very good books recently written about this. Lee Strobel, well-known author, has written some books dealing with that particular subject. And he's noted that there are some commonalities in these various encounters. And not everybody has a blissful experience in their near-death environment. You have people who experience, much as you did, Don, incredible peace, serenity, a sense of well-being and love, and then there's some kind of a message similar to the one given to you that not your time yet, and they're shown back. Mr. Strobel describes in one of his books, excuse me, an instance where a woman was pronounced dead, And she found herself hovering over the operating room, watching them try to revive her. And eventually they brought her back, and she had related these events that happened in the afterlife, where she met what you would call celestial beings, others would call them angels. Some have encounters with Jesus Christ himself. And to validate her experience, she told the medical staff, there's a red sticker on the back of the blade on the ceiling fan in that emergency room. And they went and got a ladder, and they looked up there, and sure enough, there's a red sticker on the back of that blade on the ceiling fan. And the only way anyone would have known it was there is if they had seen it from above. And so we have many of these encounters, and we don't really know what to make of them. But we do also have reports of people who claim to have had an experience sort of like hell, flames, pain, agony, incredible remorse, and sorrow and sadness. And only at a last moment, as demonic beings were leading them into places of torture, was a being of light encountered that snatched them back. Mr. Strobel describes that in his book as well. And that person is now an evangelical minister who had that, was nowhere near religion prior. So why these things happen, I don't know. But Don, I believe in your case, God gave you a second chance, that he has had a plan and purpose for your life. And you will have an opportunity to meet him again one day.
If I may, I'd like to just kind of jump onto this and share a little bit. You know, I've never had a near-death experience, and thank God for that. You know, my day will come someday, but not today. But, however, there are things that have happened to me in life that has made me spiritual, have turned more spiritual, because I've seen other things happen. I've seen evil, and I've faced evil, and then I've seen miracles. You know, not big miracles, but small miracles to make me absolutely believe that somebody answered my prayer. So that made me so much a believer in what happens. And I will just say this, that the priest that married me, he used to be a high wire man, work up on there, and he got zapped, and he actually died. And he actually floated out of his body, just like Don said, almost word for word, Don. He floated out of his body. He felt peace. He said it was just like swimming in warm water in Mexico, Cancun, you know, and stuff. And, you know, he made me such a believer in that, you know, death is nothing to be afraid of. It is something that we all will encounter someday. And then he ruins it all by getting arrested for embezzlement out of his church. He's out doing time somewhere. So that's the God's honest truth. So, I mean, he kind of like, all right, you tell me this great story, and then 6 months later, you're in jail. So, I mean, well, I guess you didn't take the second chance in life. So, I mean, it's just, but getting back to it, these small things that you see in life that sometimes people take for granted are really, you know, things that you should pay attention to, because they are answers, or they are giving you a clue of what is in store or what's really going on.
Would you like to hear my near-death experience?
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. I was 17 years old, and I was playing with homemade explosives. I was preparing for a concert, and I was the pyrotechnics man. And in the course of my experimentation on my father's workbench in our basement, a very small sample of what I was working on was detonated. And this was powerful stuff, as I'll explain in a moment. But envision a plastic vitamin bottle like you would pick up, you know, at your favorite drugstore or whatever, you know, about 3 inches tall, maybe a a couple inches wide, and it was filled 1/4 full with the substance that I was working on. A spark from another part of the workbench, when I was testing the material, a very small quantity, flew from that little test about 3 feet and landed in that bottle in which the rest of the substance was. The bottle was sitting in front of one of those multi-drawer things that many of us have on our workbenches that hold nuts, bolts, washers, things like that. The resulting explosion took all of that material and blew it back at me, blew me through the opposite wall of the room into the next room.
Oh my God.
Pushed the floor joists of my sister's room above me 6 inches up off the floor joists and lit a small fire. I was burned. I had the clothing on my torso burned and thrown off.
Shrapnel?
Shrapnel. But more on that in a moment. The eardrums were blown out and the eyes were damaged. I was blind. And that ended my aspirations for a military career right there, because you got to have some eardrums. You got to have 20/20 to be a pilot. But the fire marshal launched an investigation, and so did the FBI. And I mean, it was a long story. They didn't appreciate my homemade surface-to-air missile or my homemade grenade launcher.
What do they know?
Yeah. Or my homemade bulletproof vest, for that matter.
Captain Killjoys.
Yeah. Can't a guy have fun anymore? The investigators took my father aside a few days later and said, "Mr. Carlson, we cannot understand what happened here. The blast pattern of the shrapnel from that chest of material you had, the nuts, the bolts and washers and stuff, your son should have been absolutely annihilated. We should be picking him up from a spoon. However, the blast pattern indicates some type of a deflective barrier between your son and that shrapnel, so that only a few pieces were able to get through. But the deflection indicates that it was blown, instead of at him, in a like a V shape around him. And we have no explanation for that." And then he when the others had left, he said to my dad quietly, "I think God has a plan for your son's life, because he should be dead." And so I absolutely believe in encounters with angels and celestial beings, and whether or not I've lived up to God's standards and in the plan that he had. These are the kinds of things we have to open our hearts and minds to. The realization that, well, as Lou Elizondo said, we're not at the top of the food chain in the universe, and that we need a dose of humility to recognize that there are forces at work more powerful than ourselves that want to influence us, and we need to be cautious. So that's my story.
Impressive.
Yeah. So I still have some metal in me.
So did they take away your grenade launcher?
They did. You see, my dad was working for a major chemical company, and he had some of their rejected products in a chest in that room. And apparently when they combined, I made a new type of a toxic gas that hadn't been discovered yet. When the explosion happened and they all mixed together. So
big brain on Padre.
The feds came together with an impressive truck, I'm told. Of course, I was hospitalized and didn't see it. A vacuum truck where they sucked all the air out of the house and sent it to the FBI lab. And the results indicated apparently some type of a new toxin. And so they wanted to know, what all was in that chest. Of course, my father didn't know. It was just stuff that was thrown out at the chemical plant. So he just thought he might find some use for it. But and a testimony to government efficiency, I had been wearing my favorite jean jacket, which had patches from all the state parks and stuff that we'd visited during camping trips as I was growing up. Well, of course, it was absolutely shredded. But it was sent to FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C., where they analyzed it. And 3 months later, I get a package in the mail, and it's from the FBI. And in it is a dry cleaned and pressed, absolutely shredded jean jacket that they had returned to me because it was no longer needed in evidence. So kudos and thanks for thinking of me.
Too bad you didn't get a patent on that gas you invented. You could have been.
Well, no, and I didn't want one. I had learned my lesson. No charges were filed. It was just an interesting bump in the road in my existence. Well, wow. I see that we are coming up on the break, gentlemen. And for the second half of this program, I want to talk about something that the commander has put forward related to a video and some new information on that. And then we're going to go to the moon and talk about some anomalies that have transpired there. So please stay with us. We'll take about a 3-minute break here, and then we'll be right back on UAP Crossfire. Welcome back to UAP Crossfire. It's wonderful to have you with us tonight. And before we dive into things, we had a message in chat there, and it's a request that Chris regrow his beard because he looks more like J. Allen Hynek when he has it. So we'll have to.
So is that supposed to motivate him, or
grow my beard?
Yeah. They say it makes you look more like J. Allen Hynek. So if you would please. Stop shaving.
Chris needs to grow his beard back. He looks like J. Allen Hynek. Okay, I'll grow my beard back. Okay, I'll get a divorce too for you. How's that?
Oh dear, no.
Well, it's probably going to happen. I don't know. I don't know.
Okay.
But anyways,
you have to
if I
make
made for a
sacrifices
second,
for your art.
What's that?
You have to make some sacrifices for your art.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, but the reason I did do it is because I'm getting gray, as you could see, and I had one patch right here that was all black, and people were calling me Adolf. And I, when people go around, hey, Hitler, how you doing? You got to turn around and do something about it. So I shaved it off, but I'll bring it back, see if it just comes all great. But I would like to share with everybody here and the folks that are watching the pictures of that aerogel material. Mm-hmm. So this is the sample that they tested on. As you can see, they must have took a cut in there of a sample of it. But they say and Commander, you might know more about this than I do, but the white specks apparently are what they identify as being part of the aerogel. Are they correct on that?
I would think so. Aerogel is, like I said, a very interesting discussion. It's also been commercialized as a name for other material as well, so it's easy for that discussion. What it appears is that the white spots are the trapped aerogel that's in some kind of more solid material, be it stone or some other kind of mineral wrapped around it.
So it would be aerogel embedded within something.
Yes, and the structure apparently of what they analyzed is nothing that they can figure out how it would have been created on the Earth. At least, and it has a bit of a sensational kind of twist to it when you say something like that. But I don't. First of all, there's lots of things that we don't understand how they were created on the Earth. And then. To me, it seems like you have a pretty good chance, if it's extraterrestrial, of not of this planet. There are a number of delivery methods that it could have been part of, from everything from being part of a craft or something that came off that to something that's astronomical and its basis.
Well, I am getting the lab report on it, and when I do, I'll share it with everybody.
I've shared with you guys when I was down in Antarctica, and we flew out to a debris field, and we were taking out meteorites that were in the ice. There was, and scientists there were explaining to me that some of this came from the moon, some of it came from Mars. And I'm going, how did you know that it came from Mars? And they were explaining to me how they knew it came from Mars. It was amazing.
Interesting. We do have some recent UAP news I want to squeeze in here, gentlemen, before we go to Commander and his discussion on the gimbal. This week, added to the National Defense Authorization Act is Senate Amendment 3111, and that is the Unidentified Anomalous Phenomena Disclosure Act of 2025. It was added by Minority Leader Senator Schumer and Senator Mike Rounds and Senator Gillibrand. And so this is now up for discussion to be part of the National Defense Authorization Act. It's bipartisan legislation aimed to create a transparent and independent process to declassify UAP records, shedding light on decades of government secrecy. So that's breaking news, I guess, this week.
Technically, a couple of our guests that we've had over there, Mr. Bassett in particular, did talk about this legislation at great length, that it was coming. So not that I am a big fan of Senator Schumer, but this is a bill that he has put together and sponsored, and I think it's a really good step.
Yes, and any viewers or listeners that would have an interest in doing so, you can contact your senator. And if you are a for disclosure person, you could ask them to please support Senate Amendment 3111 to the National Defense Authorization Act. Now, we want to transfer to a subject, some information about a fairly well-known UAP event. Commander, take it away on gimbal.
Well, I want to, we have a great audience, and I just wanted to read this email. I did not get permission from Travis to use his full name, but first name Travis. They talk a lot about the Tic Tac, but they don't seem to talk about the gimbal. And if I'm not mistaken, in my eyes, it looks like the alien fighter craft in the original Independence Day films. I've watched and listened to many podcasts, and I remember no one commenting about this. What do you think, Commander? And I apologize to Travis that I have not taken the time to write him back directly. But in prep for tonight, I wanted to bring that in. I'm a little bit behind because I've been doing quite a bit of traveling. This is a screenshot. My background tonight is the screenshot from the gimbal, one of the many videos that you can find. Bill, if you are available, you can shoot the video. It's very short for this section. It's a fairly classic part. But if you look real close, right behind the capture on the HUD, right off my left ear, you will see what looks like a elongated fuselage kind of pointy nose and a wing type section that's captured in those two vertical reticle displacements. And the particular piece that I have shows a more descriptive explanation of what's going on there. It's not very, very long video. And those numbers that are across the top up on my head describe the azimuth of the airplane, the azimuth of the sensor, altitude, speed, and then there's also some information about what they have in the target area there. And to be fair, it does have a lot of a look like the craft that the famous actor Will Smith did eventually pilot. I think Independence Day is kind of a fun movie. I've always enjoyed it because it had a really human kind of aspect to it. I mean, there were some liberties taken that were pretty crazy, but it was definitely a fun movie. But I think a lot of truths were covered in that movie. So let's go ahead and play it.
Dude, this is a fucking drone, bro. a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. My gosh. They're all going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. That's not our LNS though, is it? It's not. That is an LNS, dude. Well, if there's like... Look at that thing! It's rotating.
So that, there's a number of them that we're seeing out there. Very honest talk there between the two cockpits of what they're dealing with, what they're working, or between the two airplanes if they were on the radar.
Would that have been a radar lock?
It could have been. It looks like a sensor lock. When you say radar lock, you're talking about a lock that's coming off the radar in the nose of the airplane. That imagery that you were seeing was a lock that was occurring either through an IR or an electro-optical spectrum. Looks like IR to me the way it's set up because of the way the heat, where black is probably hot in that scene. I'd have to go back and look at it. But when you have a background that is of a different temperature, and it doesn't only has to be a couple degrees, the sensor is on a gyro, and it has software that says this is what I want to look at when you designate it. And we've talked about the specs. Is it a drone? Very possibly it could have been. The fact of how it maneuvers and what it does at the end, it could be something pretty dramatic, or it could be simply the way that the aircraft turned, and then a possible heat source or a possible defensive capability is what causes it to look and take different shape and form. One thing you should be very cautious when you look at these kinds of images is that you can get that mirage effect that you remember when you're driving on a hot road and you look and you start to see the heat waves come up and it looks like there's water ahead and you obviously never get to the water. Or what people that, the famous stuff that we used to see in movies when we were all much younger, where they are walking across the distance and they think they're walking towards water because of the heat waves coming up and it's bending the light. This light is being bent and warped here on that. I think there's a lot of really interesting interpretations. So I'm gonna go to a couple. I want to make a couple points, and I'll take it around the horn with everybody here. One, greatest audience is at KGRA, and a great audience shows up for this show, and I deeply appreciate people who take the time to write us emails and check in and talk about that. And I like, I even like the negative comments as much as I like the positive ones, because it makes us better at what we're doing. And we owe this audience a discussion about the Battle of Los Angeles. I've had a couple people kind of poke and prod me, and I'm sure they've given up on me that we're ever going to get to it. I know that Don in particular has some interesting perspectives and background stuff that he did with Vicky on the magazine back in the day. And we do need to put a show around that. Next, there is a very interesting relationship between what is in movies and period movies and what is happening in science and what is happening in reports. And if you look at the different flying saucers that were portrayed in movies, some of that obviously shaped what people reported, and others are, well, did they influence it? Don has talked, and I remember years back, Chris as well, we talked about this, where there were reports of people that would make a report about having an experience, seeing something, and someone from the government would show up and they have a 3-ring binder, and they had all these like silhouette drawings, and you would go through it like a mugshot, and you'd point to what you saw. And there's a lot of old reports, some of them that were given, live verbally on this show and other shows, where people talked about what they experienced. But this person showed up, was very nice, very matter of fact, here to try to tell us what you saw, and here's, pick out your suspect, pick out what you experienced. So when you see something like this, I think it's fair that if you saw something in a major motion picture, and I think when we used to go to theaters and you had that really giant display in the dark on the screen, I think that makes a much more significant imprint than anything that you would see even on on a really great big screen TV. I think that, and that was our only medium, right? We didn't have handheld technology. We weren't being bombarded, as John was saying earlier. I think our attention spans were a little bit longer. We weren't distracted after an experience like that you had time to think about it, and it's going to calcify in your thought process. But it's a really interesting thing about what motion pictures, movie, Hollywood influence, and what has influenced Hollywood, how they put those things in there. And of course, there's always the famous case about the prop saucer that was used the day the Earth stood still, and folks that were basically showing up at UFO conventions, picking out really exuberant people in there and telling, if you invest money, we have made contact, and they're sharing the technology, but we just need the money, and it's going to replace the airlines. And people lost money. People actually bought into that. And when they finally, got to the highest enough level of paying, they brought them to a warehouse and they would show them a small section of the prop saucer that was used. And, they were always, as the story goes, they were always behind like glass. They could view it. There were people that were wearing surgical scrubs, or they were wearing, respirators, and they were supposed to be working around this craft. It's a pretty interesting concept. But I appreciate the audience in that. I think that there's a really interesting draw to that ship does look like that. But there's something interesting when I look at it from my eye. If what we're looking at in this particular frozen frame that we have, that and what we saw in the clip, that has a very aerodynamic shape to it. Something that is designed to make lift, manage drag, and be fast and be slow, and do that. But it's interacting with the air molecules. There's stuff about the imagery that makes you get the impression there may be other things going. That could be simply from the heat, because you hear them talking about how fast it's moving. And we've talked about it, especially when John Burroughs was on, that when if you really warp an airplane around, you really, really twist it around, you lower the pressure, and if there's any water vapor, and there's clouds you can see in the background of this, that those will become visible because the pressure drops so low that it'll make any water vapor turn into a visible gas. So when you see that kind of warping around, a lot of people say, well, that's a plasma kind of cloud. Well, technically it is, but it's not in that plasma generated that we talk about that may be doing it. It's the result of the physics that's going on. So there's a lot of interesting kind of normal physics. If you saw Top Gun Maverick, there's a scene where they CGI the Russian fighter, and it does a very interesting maneuver as it flips around and still maintains flight. That's a tad bit more commonplace these days to do that. So when you couple that with heat, and you couple that with the engagement and the conditions they were in when they were taking this, I can see this having it. But I find it interesting that in this particular part of it, it is very much interacting with the atmosphere, and it's not something that is excluding the atmosphere and using it another drive. Some other kind of displacement, meaning like a bubble has been formed around it and it's maneuvering and it's flying. It doesn't mean that this is a propulsion system and it's flying that way. But the shape does invoke that, and I do like when we look at popular culture and we link up those kinds of things. Oh, look, they're using the saucer, or that saucer looks like, and fill in the movie or fill in the event.
Chris, thoughts?
Well, I want to go back to what Commander was saying about Hollywood and the Independence Day and how we look at things and see it in Hollywood. And one of the things that we're seeing, not just Hollywood now, but the internet is starting to shape stories too. And one of them I've been tracking, and I just, just for giggles here, I said, let me see if I can find something here. There's a story going around in the internet, and we talked about Project Blue Beam and Jeremy Corbell has now come out and said that they're going to try to induce a false flag operation with an alien invasion and stuff and other things. And, you know, there is a story about whether it's true or not. I'm not going to give it any credit, but there's a story that something has entered our solar system and is coming toward Earth. And the stories are being more repeated on the internet. And I'm just reading something there that goes that, you know, there's a rare interstellar object racing toward our solar system. Some scientists think it may be a comet or it may be a space object, an actual craft. And now this story is starting to pick up steam. So,
sure,
basically, it's just like Commander says, the informational technology like television, Hollywood, and now the internet can influence stories, and we sort of get the idea from them, and then our imagination or whatever we absorb from these stories, we say, holy wow, it's coming true. Look at it. It is there. And, you know, years from now, something may happen. Like, I'll give you an example. Like Bob Lazar, right? People have thought Bob Lazar was a kook. He was crazy. He didn't know what he was talking about. Yet, 20 years later, a lot of stuff that Bob Lazar has said has come true. Well, Hollywood works the same way. You know, eventually, something that Hollywood produces, you know, the chances are somewhere down the road, it may very well come true.
Do you think that there is perhaps alien or hybrid influence on Hollywood?
It would make a lot of things make sense to me.
Yeah.
So I'm going to vote yes on that.
Yeah. Because then they're preparing our minds for things.
Or, you know, this is the pact. I mean, we had E.T., famous movie in the 80s, if I remember correctly, right? E.T. was a lovable character, childlike, you know, did good things. Then we have the dark, you know, evil aliens that want to take us out. I think a lot of what we talk about in that realm is also to measure. And I think it's a lot easier to make that measure. I know people probably get, you know, throw up in their mouths a little bit when I get into my whole crowdsourcing, but I just find it an absolutely amazing intelligence technique, right? The planet is wired up with handheld devices. A story like Chris is talking about comes out, and you in 30 minutes can cover the globe and track who that looked at it, who went deeper into it, who read more or went to further parts of it. That would give a location. It may even give a description of the person that looked at it. Then you can watch how that trend, how it's sent to other people, and watch all that information. It's an amazing time that we live in, and I find it horrifying at the same time because it's just completely changing how we lived and how we've lived to date on that. So it's a huge change. But I think it's fair to say that it works both ways, and it's organized or it's not organized. It'll be fun when we can play with AI and ask AI this question and watch it turn itself inside out, depending on how it was algorithmized, you know, what algorithm it has in it to do that, because those are controls that are put in there. So intentionally or unintentionally, we're physically putting controls in it to shape the outcome of what we ask AI. We're asking AI to process information that it has. AI still has a very difficult time giving you an interpretation based on some kind of meditative state or some kind of introspective examination and weighing it against experience, because it doesn't have it. They say it will. I have my doubts on how that works. I think we're going to fill in the gaps, and that's what's going to get us into trouble when we start to look at this. This is the oracle that's going to tell us what we want to have happen. Rick Legina as Wig asked me in the chat, does this sensor have the capability to produce a real camera image? It does. During daylight, the electro-optical part will give it. And nowadays, although you won't find it on most airplanes, it has pretty decent color as well. And that's important because a lot of times if you're trying to identify an aircraft, you want to look at it and you're looking for colors on maybe a wing or a fin flash to help you determine if it's a good guy, bad guy kind of situation going on, or getting the numbers or, the actual nomenclature that's on the side of it. In this particular case, and I can't say for sure, this appears to be done at night or after the sun has set, but that is not completely positively confirmed. It can happen. You can get this kind of imagery during the day under certain conditions, especially if you're working in an IR kind of world. And we used to do it all the time in Iraq. We'd have the electrical optical kind of view. We would see activity and you would immediately switch it over to the IR because you wanted to take a heat comparison. The ground's 110 degrees, but the thing you're looking at is heated up even more because it's metallic. And then that would tell us that, in my case, maybe it's an IED, and we want to be able to, guide ground forces around it or to intercept it.
That's fascinating. So much information that we can have now with these advanced sensors that we didn't have a decade ago, and they just keep getting better and faster. And who knows what they're going to show us in the years ahead.
But Padre, I'm going to tell you something that also comes out of this situation. We get more and more reticent to make a decision. So one of the things that's happened is when you used to dispatch forces, like when Don went out to the wire to check on, his perimeter, when we sent aircraft out and we're working on radar returns, a decision had to be made at the point of intersection or intercept. You had to make a decision. Now, you can see activity, but people that are in the command position want even more. They want another a viewpoint to show up. So when you walk into a tactical operations center, you may have 5, 6, 7 screens. You may have a satellite imagery that's showing up. You may have a drone that's showing up. You may be looking at the HUD that's coming out of a fighter or a helicopter, looking at that, and you're trying to coalesce all that information. And when you get used to having that kind of information, when you don't have all those available, then you're going to really slow down to make a decision to engage or not to engage, to provide close air support, not provide it, and we become more victimized. Look at how we are now with our phones. People lose their minds if they aren't able to connect, or if their phone runs out of power, because they feel like their lifeline, their connection is gone. I'm guilty of it. I do drive around with a Walmart Atlas in my car, but I haven't taken it out in a real long time. And I get really, really upset, especially when I rent a car, that if I have to stop and buy another adapter to plug that phone into it so that I have my navigation, I have my image, literally my imagery and my messages coming through while I'm driving. And I remember driving across this entire country with nothing but road maps. In some cases, picking them up along the way.
Yes, I still do. And we have a whole generation.
Everybody put their hand up, and those at home that are playing at home.
Yeah.
Well, I'm headed west. I have no idea what road I'm on, and I know I need to go west. And I'm just going to keep doing that for a couple of days until I find a town big enough that I can get a map to really, get me closer to where I want to go.
And sadly, we have, I fear, a whole generation coming up that does not know how to read a map.
Well, they do, but not the kinds of maps and charts that we read.
Well, what's blown me away is these last several generations that have come up claiming they wouldn't know how to operate a rotary phone. I mean, good God, how much technology do you need to spin that dial? Or an 8-track tape deck. I still, believe it or not, in my garage, my wife, I'm glad she's in the other room because I could hear her right now. I still have 8-track tapes back there somewhere stored.
Have you seen what you can get for those now? You should do some pricing online of your 8-track collection. You might be set for quite some time. Because
I can't let the 8-track go without making mention of this. but Bill Lear, while he was working on building the Lear jet, worked on the 8-track player at night in his garage. He was building that because he needed it to finance what he was doing on the Lear jet. That technology came from Bill Lear.
Fascinating. Well, before our show time gets away from us here, we had mentioned that we would be talking a little bit about the moon and some of the UAP-related news that's come from the moon. And Don, you've done a lot of research on that.
And has assigned us some homework.
Yes.
The past few weeks.
Yeah. So would you...
Which I might add, I've gotten very little feedback.
You and I had
on that homework.
We had a very lovely discussion on the phone about it.
I said,
and I wrote you up for everyone to read.
Yep. So Don,
Chris was a lost opportunity there. I sent him stuff 6 months ago. I still haven't heard from him.
Well, Mr. MUFON has a very busy schedule.
Yes.
Going to conferences, coordinating training activities.
Ducking behind tables.
Ducking behind. Let's not go there, please.
Well, let's reel this back in. And Don, first for our viewers who may not be familiar with what apparently is suppressed information having to do with UAP contacts on the moon, why don't you just give us first a high-level view and then we'll dive in.
Okay, sure. I'll tell you when I really got hooked into the moon was right after Christmas, 1963. The one thing I wanted for Christmas was this small telescope. And my parents ordered one, but it didn't get there for Christmas. It was actually delivered a couple of days later. So that first night, I took it outside in 6 inches of snow and set it up and started angling the thing around. And my first view of the moon, I got to say, I was knocked silly.
It's breathtaking.
I couldn't believe, huh?
It's breathtaking.
Oh, yeah, it really is. So anyway, I guess it was around that time, in that time frame, I was reading a lot of stuff in school. Not all of it had to do with school. Frank Edwards comes to mind. John Keel comes to mind. Stuff that they were writing basically on UFO, UAP, today we would say UAP, items, topics, cryptozoology, animals, that type of thing. Well, one thing I read in one of Frank Edwards' books concerned a spot on the front of the moon, the side that we see, where some Harvard astronomers basically photographed what looked like a Celtic cross. Are you guys familiar with that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And no absolute explanation for what the heck was there. Then some other things that cropped out from Donald Kehoe. He wrote a series of books during his tenure at NICAP on oddities, strange things on the moon that very few people talked about in the public, including a bridge on Mare Crisium that had been discovered by a science writer about 1954-55, where this bridge extended roughly, they estimated 12 miles over this gap, and you could actually see the shadow that this bridge basically cast. Well, that had my head spinning. So, life intruded. I went away to college, then I went in the Army, and all that kind of stuff. Then I came back I got married. I mean, a lot of things happened where I didn't really get a chance to basically do a lot of study and research until 86, when I was injured on duty, ended up medically retiring, and then suddenly I had some time. Well, I jumped into it head first. And the more I discovered, the more I learned, the more I was convinced that artificial activity, in other words, not from any natural source, had happened on the moon, may still be happening on the moon. And then I discovered a technical report that NASA had conducted a study on, called NASA Technical Report TR 277. And this was a compilation of 400 years of studies by world-class astronomers on the moon on phenomenon that became known as translunar phenomena, TLP. Well, I jumped into that. And in this NASA technical report, there were, and by the way, you can find this online. It's available online. As a matter of fact, I downloaded it myself. But in this report, things like craters suddenly flaring up and bright lights being displayed out of certain craters periodically. NASA, prior to Apollo, astronomers discovered they called them lunar domes, suddenly popping up, would be in an area for a week, 2 weeks, sometimes 3 weeks. The next time the astronomer would go back to take a look, they were gone. They had moved to a different location. Now, what in the world could have caused that? Unless it was some type of non-human activity. Because human beings were not on the moon yet. Nobody had gone to the moon. So, as I really got into it, I met a guy on my original radio show, UFOs Tonight, who had basically introduced me to a science writer that came out with a book in 1976 by the name of George Leonard. The title of the book, Somebody Else is on the Moon. Now, when Leonard started writing that, he had an in with a number of science people involved with the Apollo program. And he got to see many of these then uncensored photos. Well, he included a number of them in his book. Now, surprisingly, the book disappeared almost as quickly as it showed up. You're hard-pressed today. Now, you can find used copies. I have a used paperback that I bought a number of years ago. And in this, he showed craters with what appeared to be excavation happening then. A lot of stuff like that. Two of the most astounding photos that I saw, and I got the actual photographs then, were of two objects that had been photographed rolling up and out of lunar craters and proceeding across the lunar landscape, leaving behind tread marks that looked almost like armored vehicles. If you've ever seen something like a tank tread, you'll know what I'm talking about. Well, about 1998, at UFO Magazine, a new book, which was self-published, was released by a fellow by the name of Ingo Swann. Now, just about that, and that's Ingo Swann right there, and me. We had met at an Italian restaurant over in Burbank. I'll tell you about that in a minute. But Swan, as it turned out, was the man that trained all of the military remote viewers in the Stargate program. He was almost universally considered one of the most gifted psychics at that time in the world. And let me tell you what, after I got to meet him and then got to know him, that was pretty obvious. And how did I meet him? I guess it was sometime right around the turn of the century. And I received a telephone call at the magazine from Pat Marcatilio. Now, at that time, I was doing on my radio show a lot of lunar-themed broadcasts. Brought people in, interviewed them, talked about the moon, talked about a lot of these anomalies that were popping up. And Pat Marcatilio said, Don, he said, would you consider flying back to Bordentown, New Jersey for my UFO group and giving a talk about your research? And I talked to Vicki. We decided, yeah, we can do that. We can fly back. So we did. And the day of my lecture, all these people came into the auditorium. And I saw people there like Linda Moulton Howe was there. And I saw this other coterie of people come in, sit down in a group. And I had no idea who they were. And after my talk, and I had photographs and things that I was showing, somebody came up and said, Don, there's somebody here that would like to meet you. His name is Ingo Swann. I thought, Ingo Swann, it's kind of familiar. Who is Ingo Swann? And then it clicked. Oh my God, he was the guy that blah, 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 Stargate. So we get up there into a room and we talked for a couple hours. And he had already talked about his lunar experience in his book, Penetration. This was the book that came out about 1998 that was self-published. Well, let me tell you what, when I read Swann's book, it put me back on my heels. And one of the items, and I'm sure you guys have all heard some of these incidents that he relayed, but sometime in the mid-1970s, when he was still at SRI, Stanford Research Institute, and he was training people, and by the way, there was another psychic star there by the name of Pat Price. So with Swann and Price, we had some of the biggest guns in the psychic field. I mean, I could go on for hours about what had transpired with all of this stuff. We don't have the time. But the big fear was that the Soviet Union, because at that time the Russians were still in business, were making great strides and advancements into psychic phenomena, psychic research, and one of the big fears was that they might find somebody gifted enough psychically that they could influence or possibly even terminate, with extreme prejudice, if you know that term, somebody through psychic means alone. Did you guys ever go see the film, The Men That Stare at Goats?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it was based on a lot of that. A lot of that was true. A lot of it was Hollywood, but a lot of it was true.
And it was intentionally done in a way to mock the good work.
Right. Well, let me tell you what, pals. This is some serious business. So anyway, Swann was had family out here on the West Coast. So I got a call from a friend of his, and he said, hey, by the way, Don, he said, look, Ingo is flying out on such and such a date, And he wanted me to check and see if you and Vicky might be available to have dinner with him. Oh, you bet, sure. So we went to this little Italian restaurant in Burbank. Oh my God, what a place that was. And had about almost a 5-hour dinner. A couple of bottles of some very good wine. Italian food was, and it was one hell of an evening. Now, here was the thing. I had a ton of questions that I derived from his book, Penetration. And if you have not read Penetration, ladies and gentlemen, take a quick note. Go up on the internet, use your search engine, put in Penetration and Ingo Swann. You can download it. Somebody put a PDF of his entire book up there, and you can download it and read it. So anyway, there were actually a couple of things that I wanted to question him about. One was Swann had come out here one time. He was a gourmet cook and had come out here to visit some friends. And they were going to have this big gourmet dinner, some really fine wines, just make a real night out of it. So he was down in, I'm trying to remember now, Santa Monica, I think, shopping, walked into this grocery store. And as he's walking down this aisle, he sees this female at the end of the aisle going through some vegetable bins. And something immediately tickled his mind. And he looked at her and he said, "My God, I never saw a more sexually attractive, alluring woman in my life." She was wearing a pair of hot pants, had like a scarf she used as a brassiere over her ample breasts. Her hair was long, thick, flowing. And as he walked down, he said, I had to get closer to her. I had to really eyeball this girl. Something happened, and his psychic talent kicked in. This is what he told me. And he stopped, and he said, my God, she's alien. She's not a human woman. She's an alien. And then, as he's trying to figure, should I get the hell out of here? He's looking, and on either side of this aisle where this woman is, he sees the twins. Now, if you don't know who the twins were, this goes back to 1975. He was contacted at SRI, okay, by one of his friends who said, you're going to be receiving a telephone call in the next couple of weeks, and I just suggest you take the call when it comes in. So one night at his apartment in New York, okay, he lived in New York, the city, 3 a.m. his phone rings, okay? Now, me, I'd have thrown the damn phone off the nightstand. I wouldn't get up at 3 a.m. But he answered it. And this woman was on the line. He didn't know who she was. And said, Mr. Swann, this gentleman would like to speak to you. Would you go to this phone booth? And it was blocks away from where he lived. And he'll call you at, 3:55 or whatever the time was. Swann got up, went to this place. The phone rang. He answered it. And a guy identified himself as Mr. Axelrod and told Swann, well, he said enough that Swann's curiosity was piqued, said he wanted to meet with him. And this is what you do. You fly down to D.C., go to the Natural History Museum, where you'll be met, and it was real cloak and dagger stuff. So Swan did. He went down to D.C. These two guys, twins, he called them the twins, met him, handed him a card, told him to not say anything. They were going to walk to a car and get Swan into the car. And when they did, they blindfolded him. They then drove him out to an airport, got him off the car, into a helicopter. The helicopter took off and flew off. He didn't know where. He thought it flew around in circles to screw his sense of direction. And then they finally landed. He was taken to a underground room in a building. He had no idea where it was. And then they took the blindfold off. And they knew all about his work at SRI. He didn't know who these guys were. They didn't identify themselves. Make a long story short, they offered him a job. The job was to remote view a location, and they would pay Swan $1,000 a day during the time of this RV session. Well, my God, 1975, $1,000 was nothing to sneer at. So he agreed to do it. Well, it ended up being the coordinates they gave him was for the dark side of the moon, the side that never shows up. We never see it. Now, when he realized what it was, he was flabbergasted. And he started going to these different coordinates. And suddenly, he saw this area that was lit up like, these huge spotlights you'd see in a football auditorium. And he walked over, or in his mind, he didn't walk, but he went over in his mind, and he saw these beings working down in this crater under this huge green luminescent shield, he said. And when he saw this, that really flabbergasted him. But then one of those guys down on the floor of the crater that was working looked up toward where Swan was positioned at, then several more. And he told Axelrod, who was in the room with him where he was doing this RV session, "My God, they see me." He said, "Get out of there right away." Well, he broke the, what do you call it, a trance, whatever. He's back on Earth. And Swan told me, he said, he said, "Don," he said, "for the next 3 months," he said, "honest to God, I was terrified they were going to track me down and fry my brains because they were enormously telepathic." Well, this was just part of that session. But I, through some means, got some photographs of a place on the rear side of the moon called King's Crater. Okay? And in this lunar photograph, it was taken from orbit. You got to train your eye, because I don't know if you've ever looked up close at some of these lunar pictures, but there's a freaking base there. In this photograph, there were a number of habitats. One at the rear of the picture, it looked almost like an old Army Quonset hut. And Cobra, I know you know what they look like.
Yep.
It had lit windows. There were huge satellite dishes positioned there. There were pictures of antenna array, things like that. It's I found it to be a terrifying photograph. Now, in 1995, right after Thanksgiving, on my radio show that I was doing then for CRN, and if you guys want to hear this broadcast, I'll send it to you. I had a guest on there by the name of Vito Sicari. And gentlemen, if you look at your vids that I sent you of that lunar show, Sicari is briefly in there. And this is something I got very pissed off about when they were doing the show. I thought this guy should have had a much bigger segment on that show. But his name was Vito Sicari, was a petrochemical engineer. Now, in 1978-79, he was an engineer for a petrochemical company down in Houston. And they had dealings with another company. They were trading information back and forth with an oil company in Venezuela. Okay? American. It was an American-run outfit. This is back before Venezuela went total communist and basically shit their economy into the creek. But they had one of their engineers was flying up to Houston to work on some project that they had together. And Sicari and him had been in touch through teletype. This was even before the internet, was available. And so they had become friends at a distance. Well, when the guy got up there, his name was Lester Howells, they met and they were talking, let's go get a cup of coffee, By the way, Vito, did you ever see this book? And he reached into his back pocket and pulled out this book called Somebody Else is on the Moon by George H. Leonard. And Sicari said, no. He said, Lester said, I want you to take this home tonight. I want you to go through that book. And then I'm going to talk to you about it tomorrow.
2 minutes, Don. 2 minutes left. So we're going to have
to continue this story on another segment.
Okay. Well, this picture of the base, was that base on the dark side of the moon?
Yes. Yes. And if you guys want, next week, we can finish that up.
But how do you take pictures on the dark side of the moon?
From orbit.
But it's dark.
And it's not dark. The sun shines there. It's just we don't see it.
It really is not the dark side of the moon. That's a Pink Floyd album. It's the far side of the moon. And when we have our new moon, it's completely illuminated.
I like Pink Floyd. The far side, too. The dark side, yeah. I like Pink Floyd. But anyway, yeah, it's back there. And yes, you can see. As a matter of fact, the Chinese landed their Jade rover in that area.
So this base, he says he saw people on it. Did they have spacesuits on? Or
No. They were under a shield. They were not human beings.
Like a force field?
Yes. I'm going to say, because I'm a Trekker, I used to watch Star Trek all the time. Yeah. But yeah, they had some type of a dome structure or something where they were working out in the lunar dirt without environmental suits. This is what Ingo told me,
Yeah.
I didn't see this, Padre.
Right.
This is, I'm relaying to you. But he talks about it in his book, Penetration. So
right, and we have posted the link to that on chat so that people in chat can download it and read it. Gentlemen, we have had a marvelous discussion tonight covering a wide range of topics. Let's just go around the horn really quick. Closing thoughts, Chris.
It's an interesting story. I believe that there's probably a base on the moon. I believe that there's probably bases on Earth. I believe there's aliens walking among us. What we think is folklore or just make-believe stuff, a lot of it comes true down the road. I have no reason not to believe that, extraterrestrials are here. They've been here for a long time. And as they said in the X-Files, Mr. Mulder, They've been here for a long time.
Commander.
Great show. Great audience. Please send those emails. And Don, I look forward to picking this up next week.
That's Commander Cobra at, let's say, Commander Cobra.
KGRA Radio DB, Gmail.
Okay. I had an extra K in there. All right. Thank you. And to the best audience on the planet, may the peace that passes all understanding rest on all of you over the course of the next week until we meet again here on UAP Crossfire.